Welcome to the Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. We are officially streamers now, despite our few false starts this lovely afternoon. So be sure to come check out our new Let's Play series that we're doing over on the Pixel Therapy Pod YouTube channel. For our first game playthrough, Spencer's been working their way through Alan Wake Remastered in preparation
Dragging my way, more like.
Crawling. And that's been in preparation for Alan Wake 2, which just came out this past Friday, and is getting really good reviews. Looks very scary. I can't wait to check that out.
But we might have to play it on stream.
Maybe. And just be extra scared.
Yeah.
But if you are not in the loop on what's going on with our streaming, we have settled into a bit of a schedule here where we are doing Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. ET. We'll try to keep people posted when we need to skip a stream or two. But our next two streams are scheduled for this coming Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween stream at 8 p.m. ET, and Thursday, November 2nd, also at 8 p.m. ET. So if you haven't had a chance to come check us out yet and watch us play Alan Wake, please do so. We'd love to have you on the stream and have you in the YouTube chats and chatting it up, chit-chatting it up. So yeah, you can go over there. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and click that bell to ensure you get the notifications when we go live. Moving on next to our Patreon shout outs. That is our special thank you to everyone who subscribed at our Patreon name in the credits tier for the month of September. And that means we have a very big thank you to give to Genevieve, Lindsay, Pimhatai, See Thee Mess, Ava, Sammy, and Alexis. Thank you all so much for your support over on Patreon. Remember, if you want to get your name in the credits, you can hop on over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can subscribe for as little as $2 a month and get access to a monthly bonus episode that's exclusive to Patreon, plus the entire backlog of bonus episodes that stretch all the way back to November of 2020. That is a lot of content, folks. In our Patreon bonus episode that we did for October, we talked about Spencer's time so far with Alan Wake, as well as what I thought of my time with Cyberpunk 2077's. Why did that number come out so weird? 2077's. That's right? Why does it
it's
feel
a
like
mouthful? Yeah.
Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty expansion. I don't know why I wasn't able to say that like a human, but there you have it. So if discussions about either of those games sound like something you want to hear us talk about, or if you're just looking for a little more pixel therapy in your life, and who wouldn't be, check out the Patreon and get access to over 3 years worth. Over 3 years. Worth.
Somehow.
I don't know how we've been doing this for 3 years. I'll be honest. Of monthly bonus episodes. Holy cow. If you already subscribed to us on Patreon, or if you're looking for a way to show your support for free, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, because every review there does really matter for small podcasts like us. And know, of course, that no matter how you choose to engage with us, we appreciate you being here all the same. All right. It's time to get cozy. Pull up an armchair. Feel free to lie down on the couch, and let's talk about our feelings. Spencer, how are you doing today? What is up?
Well, I mean, it has to be said. It's on theme for today. Speaking of pirates, we just experienced collectively, all of us together, we experienced the season 2 finale of Our Flag Means Death over on Max. We're not going to spoil anything, but I do want to mention that there's been a lot of drama with the whole HBO acquisition. Lots of shows are getting canceled. There is a group of fans who have put together this campaign. It's called Renew as a Crew, with the goal of getting season 3 of Our Flag Means Death. It's a show chronicling the queer found family and queer love in many forms between this crew of misfits and our two main characters, Edward Teach and Stede Bonnet, played by Rhys Darby and Taika Waititi. It's such a great show. I'd love to see the creator, David Jenkins, intended for 3 seasons. I absolutely would love to see the conclusion. This show has been just, I mean, there's just something endlessly enthralling about a flamboyant, like over the top service top and goth GF power bottom that like I can't get enough of. So I think we can all agree that there's plenty more story to be sewed from that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, and just around the joy, the unequivocal openness, and the kind of queer story that doesn't center on pain and suffering. Like, we absolutely need more of that in the world, especially now. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. But it's just hilariously funny, and absolutely turns on its head the kind of tropes and historical ways queer stories have been told on screen. And two, just from a standpoint of really showing the spectrum of queer love, whether it's platonic, whether it's polyamorous, whether it's neurodivergent. Like, there's just so much that it gives and makes space for. And I personally feel like mainstream television needs more of that. So that's my plug. Check out Our Flag Means Death.
And all of that while still being like, I mean, it's got great action scenes. It's fun and adventurous. It's incredibly hilarious. Like, the cast is spot on, and I'm constantly laughing with every episode, and then, you know, turning around and crying a second later. It's the show has layers. Levels and layers.
Levels and layers. Oh my God. And the fan art and fan fiction community is giving. So, you know, there's that.
Absolutely.
It single-handedly got me back on Tumblr for all of the reasons. So that's how I am. I think that's all that exists in my brain currently. How are you?
You know, I'm okay. Speaking of historical queer stories, I spent my the past couple of weeks reading a book that you had recommended to me, which is called Fingersmith, that was written in 2002 by Sarah Waters, which is ostensibly a historic crime novel. That's how they describe it, set in Victorian era Britain, but actually, like, is a pretty queer book for folks who are interested in queer love stories. And I read that book is actually the basis for the movie The Handmaiden, which has been recommended to me many times over the years. That's a 2016 South Korean psychological thriller film directed by Park Chan-wook.
So good.
Very good. So I actually watched that last night. So I read the book the last couple of weeks and then decided to finally dive in and watch the film. I was not prepared for how explicit those sex scenes in The Handmaiden were going to be. Like, nothing prepared me for that. So at one point I'm sitting there watching it, and my partner is just sitting next to me on the couch playing video games, and he just looks over at the TV. It's like, and so I just awkwardly was like, yeah, that's pretty graphic. But it's a great fucking movie and a really good book. I think people should check these things out. What I really appreciated was someone who literally just finished the book. So I guess both of these stories are, I want to be careful not to spoil anything. They are crime, they're historical crime dramas. That is essentially what they are, about a young woman who is sent to be a handmaiden for a wealthy, the woman is not currently wealthy. She is going to be. She lives with her wealthy uncle. And then once she's married, she will be wealthy. And so like the story begins following the perspective of a young woman who's been raised as a thief and a crook, who is going to be the handmaiden for this wealthy woman, or soon to be wealthy woman, to help her crook friend marry the woman and steal her riches. So it's this plot to deceive this woman and get her money. But I mean, I think what ends up happening, that I think both the film and the book wear on their sleeve pretty quickly, is that the two women end up falling in love. and then where that takes them. And it's very twisty-turvy, like really keeps you on your toes. And I really appreciated, as someone who had just read the book, I thought going into the film, I was really going to know like where all the beats were. But the film actually departs from the book in some really interesting ways that I thought was super cool. So I definitely recommend people check both of those things out. The book is a little too long. I don't know. The book drags at some parts.
Isn't it like 500 pages or something like that?
Yeah, it's pretty long. It's mostly really good, but because of the way the story is structured, there's some parts of it that kind of like retread things is how I'll put it. And it takes a long time to do that. But the book is nowhere near as graphic as the film. So that definitely came as a surprise, but the film is incredibly well made. And I think definitely the film being described as a psychological thriller. I don't know if I'd quite go that far that it's a thriller, but it definitely ups the like psychological ante from the book and what the book presents. And obviously they're in very distinct settings, different time periods, but really fucking cool. I recommend people check those out if you haven't.
Oh my gosh. I was just reflecting on, like, I must have read Fingersmith like 10 plus years ago at this point. Wow, I honestly, you reading it now makes me want to crack it back open again. But I mean, that book is like within the lesbian canon of literature in a storied place. Like, I mean, great book, great cultural significance, great cult following, just the whole like Victorian era-ness of it all, very sapphic. I just remember, so Park Chan-wook, he also directed Old Boy, which is one of those movies that you watch once and kind of never want to watch again. But definitely one of my, I guess, favorite movies, if you can call it that, but a movie that absolutely transformed the way I saw film and also just opened up a whole appreciation of the kind of storytelling that you can do with film. And it's just one of those movies that has never left my mind. I remember in 2016 being like, oh yeah, there's this movie, The Handmaiden, coming out from the same director as Old Boy. And I watched the trailer and I was like, wow, this is reminding me of something. Have I seen this before? I look up the movie and see that it's a direct film adaptation of Fingersmith. And the way I felt like my little gay heart was about to explode at the way my two worlds were colliding in this way. Like, it was the film event of the year for me.
That's awesome.
And it was only significant to me because I don't know who else has the intersection of like high art Korean thrillers and Victorian historical lesbian fiction. But my God, 2016 was a great year for that reason alone, and terrible in every other way.
Well, now we know. I mean, those two things go together like peanut butter and jelly. Now we know.
Absolutely.
Like, that's a great combo.
Man. So yes, highly recommend both. Love that for you. Wish I could have experienced it alongside you for the first time, but very happy that it's happening for you.
Yeah. It was really great. And I definitely recommend more people check those things out. And I think it was like, I feel like you could totally just jump right in and watch the movie. I definitely like appreciated the experience of reading the book and then watching the movie. That felt like I don't know. It made some parts of the movie, like I said, more surprising because I was expecting things to go one way and then they twisted it a bit. And I think the way the book is written makes sense, and the way things happen in the book makes sense for that time period. But there are ways in which the Handmaiden just gives more, I don't know if power is the right word, but like there's more agency and stuff given to our two main characters in the movie that I really appreciated, that they isn't really afforded to them in the book. And that's contextualized well because of the time period and because of how difficult it was for women to get by without men. But that is still the case in the Handmaiden film, and yet they find cool ways to just give the women more power over their situation, which I thought I appreciated. I think the book would have been perhaps better if it had gone in that direction, though I still like the way the book played out. Yeah.
Word.
And that's all I'll say about that. Go check those things out. But you're probably listening to this podcast because you like video games. So let's talk about one of those.
Weird.
Let's talk about one of those old video games. We have been playing a delightful little game called Saltsea Chronicles, which is a new story-driven adventure game released on October 12th on PC, PS5, and Nintendo Switch from the award-winning indie studio Die Gute Fabrik, who are the makers of Mutazione, which is a game that you and I, Spencer, played and discussed on the podcast all the way back in June 2021, if you can believe it. And we really like Mutazione, so we were very excited for Saltsea Chronicles when that got announced and to have a chance to play that. The game's website describes it as centering around a misfit crew who must heist their impounded ship and mount a rescue of their kidnapped captain, guide the crew across islands of a post-flood world known as Saltsea, explore strange and wonderful communities, uncover a deep conspiracy, choose where to go and which crew members to investigate with, and chart a journey through twists and turns, difficulties, and delights. That is the setup of the game. Spencer, let's start off. Can you tell me how much of Saltsea Chronicles have you played? What are you playing it on? And what's your high-level take on this game?
Yeah, so I'm 6 chapters in and about 12 hours into the game. Definitely a lot meatier than I think I was anticipating off of the bat. Like, I think in direct comparison to Mutazione, it's like flowered and gone deeper in like almost every way, and which I'm sure we can speak on a bit later. But I'm playing it on the Steam Deck, and I think the way that style of the game, the way it is, like I do wonder. It seems very conducive to a point and click format, and so part of me wonders if it might be even more intuitive to play with on a desktop, where you have total control of a mouse. There's a lot of that kind of investigative, like point and click to learn more kind of games. But that being said, I'm very much enjoying it on the Steam Deck. And high level take, I mean, I love it. I think it's Die Gute Fabrik does an excellent job of setting a tone and creating a world that feels both familiar and unfamiliar, but in a way that is so unique and makes you want to explore in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming or scary or too alien. Like it's just enough that it feels like you're in a comforting place with friends. And also there's just so much interesting world building and development that it makes you keep wanting to explore more and more and more. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm, just coming off of Our Flag Means Death, more kind of queer found family pirate ship stuff is like, there's something about it. It's very, both from an escapism standpoint and from a imagining what our world could be standpoint. It's a very enjoyable game. So I'm having a great time. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. So I finished the game, and you're at chapter 6. That's about halfway. You're about the midpoint of the game. The game has 12 chapters. I played it on PS5. And ran super smoothly there, no issues at all.
Nice.
And yeah, my high level take is that the very ending of the game felt a bit off to me, which left kind of an odd taste in my mouth after finishing it. But as I've kind of sat with it, so I finished this earlier this week, like Tuesday, I think. I was kind of playing it like one episode at a time, like a night over the past couple of weeks. But as I've sat with it over the last few days and kind of worked, like had some more distance from that ending, I really appreciate so much what this game does and is doing in terms of how it lays out its narrative, how it presents the characters, the world that it is putting in front of us to explore. I can't wait to talk about this in more depth with you, but I think my initial reaction when I finished it was like, oh, I was really enjoying that. And then that ending kind of left me in a weird spot. And I think as I've had a little more time to process it, I've kind of come back around and I'm like really high on the game for what the bulk of it is, even if I still have a little quibble about the way it ends, if that makes sense.
I'm scared.
Don't be scared. I think like it really is a quibble. It's like there's so much that I like about what they did with the tone of the ending and how they set it up. It's just literally like the very final moment of the game. I don't want to spoil anything. It sort of tees up or suggests a possibility of a sequel game that felt out of left field to me a bit, and also unneeded, and not like something a game of this ilk needed or should have done. So it was a weird like toss at something and then an abrupt ending it just felt out of place to me. And not necessary like for what the story was. I feel like they could have left that off and not had this almost cliffhanger. There's almost like a cliffhanger vibe to the way the game ends that I don't think it needed. And maybe they intend to make a follow-up game, which would be cool. Like I'd love to keep exploring the world with these characters, but also like the situation that the cliffhanger presents is not like a reason that I would want to come back to the game. I would want to come back to the game because of the characters in the world that they've set up, and not this like narrative like like moment that they kind of give us right at the very end. If that makes sense, because that's not the vibe of the game like throughout. I mean, you're pursuing your missing captain. There is mystery and intrigue to the game, but like that's not really the hook of the game, and not what keeps you moving from island to island, or at least it didn't with me. It's not what I think the beating heart of the game is, nor do I think it's what the game necessarily does best. So I thought that was kind of a weird way to wrap that very final moment, and kind of a weird taste to leave in player's mouth. But I don't think, don't be worried, because I think until that point, like until the literal last minute of the game, it's excellent. So
damn, what happens in this minute?
It's just,
I gotta go.
You gotta get there. You gotta get there and find this last minute. So let's talk a bit about the actual gameplay of the game. And I'm gonna get on my soapbox a little bit here, Spencer.
Great. We love that.
So this game is ultimately it's a point and click adventure game. It's a visual novel, essentially. You're given more narrative. You're given more decision making control than a visual novel would usually have. But the primary way you're interacting with the game is to navigate to a point on the screen with your cursor, click on it, and read text. And then maybe you make some choices within the text that's presented. Now you had as a joke, sent me a meme, as you're wont to do, in which someone had taken a picture of a PlayStation controller, which they had blacked all of the buttons out except for the X. And the picture was titled, I'm going to forget it now, but it was like visual novel fans will be like, I love the gameplay. And then it's like the gameplay. And it's this picture of a controller with only one button.
Just one button.
And he sent that to me to have a little laugh. Like, oh, haha, visual novels do be like this. The gameplay is only one button. And what the soapbox that I want to get on here is like, I can laugh. I can laugh at a fun internet joke along with anyone. But people who say a visual novel has good gameplay are not talking about the game input mechanics, you fucking goat. They are talking about the way the player interacts with the game, because gameplay, I will say, is much more than the button input of a game.
Truth.
On its own is not gameplay. That is not gameplay. And I think purporting that the only way to play a game is for it to be a true game, or to be or to have engaging gameplay, is to have mechanically complex button entries is I don't know, ableist and really limiting in terms of what the scope of gameplay can be. So that was my soapbox. And I just have to say that, because we do play a good number of like point and click story adventure games, visual novels, and I enjoy those a lot. I also enjoy more mechanically complex games. I'm playing Spider-Man 2 right now. That's a game that's much more mechanically complex. I can say that Saltsea Chronicles and Spider-Man 2 are both really fucking good games, and both have really interesting gameplay, even though I'm talking about completely different things in those buckets. So anyway, I just had to get on my soapbox a little bit there.
Cut to me pausing God of War every 10 minutes to study the controls page and make sure I'm hitting the right chains of combos. Like, absolutely, there's space for that in the gaming community. And if you're someone who thrives under that kind of duress, then I applaud you.
Yeah, and if that's even what you prefer, that's okay. This is not me coming at anybody for their gaming preferences. But I think trying to suggest that visual novels or that games in this category don't have gameplay because it's the button entry is limited is false. Sorry, I cut you off.
Absolutely. No, yes, bury that. And I think for me, something that I really enjoyed about this game was just the way that it, I found it to be incredibly rich and involved and creative in the way it was even approaching this genre of a visual novel. Like, not that there's anything wrong with visual novels that are incredibly straightforward, like clicking through to progress text. Like, the way that games are continuously pushing what that looks like and what that single button press can do within a world and a scene is just continually blowing my mind. It's like such a simple approach that has endless ways of unfolding. And you can never convince me that that's not just as creative and intelligent gameplay as something much more complex as your Spider-Mans or God of Wars out there. So just agreeing wholeheartedly.
Thank you for supporting me in this moment. So anyway, that is the primary way that you interact with the game. And what you'll be doing with that press of the X button is exploring points of interest across the landscape or on your ship. And these might be scenic elements. So there will be like a little eyeball icon when you navigate to that point, and that'll indicate that it's something where it's just going to describe something about the scene that you're sitting in, because the imagery of the game is pretty static, almost storybook is how I've seen it described, and I would agree with that. They kind of carry forward a very similar art style that was used in Mutazione, where the everything kind of looks like it was maybe cut out of construction paper. Yeah. And layered onto itself to create the images, and characters can look varying degrees of quote unquote human. Like people come in a lot of different colors that are not necessarily specific skin colors that we see, blues and greens and things like that. And noses can be a variety of different shapes. It's almost a little Picasso-esque in the way some characters.
Someone's whole face might be a nose.
Yeah, someone's whole face might be a nose, right? So it's all very impressionist in terms of the way characters are presented, but it suggests a great like diversity of people and cultures through a very like still simple and very colorful art style. So you're not moving through the scene in terms of motion. You're presented with a pretty static image that could be your ship or a specific landscape, and then there's different points of interest identified across that landscape that you then navigate the cursor to and click on. And so if it's something that's visual about the scene, you'll just get a little pop-up of text that describes like, oh, there's this bird sitting here and it does this. Or, there's a piece of art hanging on the wall and this is what it looks like, that kind of stuff to color in the world. And then there's other interaction points that will initiate a dialogue. Maybe that's a dialogue between, you always enter locations with at least 2 crew members. And part of the gameplay is deciding which crew member you're going to bring with you and deciding where to go. So at the end of each chapter, the crew decides where they're going to go next. And at the beginning of the chapter, when you've reached that location, you decide there will be at least one crew member on the ship who says, I definitely need to go on the island because of this reason. And then you'll get to pick which other crew member will go with you. And usually that choice is down to between 2 to 3 other characters on the ship, kind of depending on who's there. So when you get to those kind of like dialogue points of interest, that might be a conversation between the crew members that are exploring the island, or it might be a conversation between the crew members and a local who lives on the island. So that's how you're engaging with the game itself. You can also, there's opportunities to play a card game, like a game within a game that exists, which is called Spoils. And the developer actually shared that part of the reason, so Die Gute Fabrik, they're really good about like blogging and like putting stuff out there about how and why they made the game. And there was a blog piece that they did that was with specifically the developer who created Spoils. And they were talking about the main reason that they wanted to put Spoils in the game, or to have like a game within a game element, was specifically to give players a break from reading text and work their brain in a different way, which I thought was really interesting because I want to ask you what you thought of Spoils here in a second. But like for me, even though I didn't sometimes spoils annoyed me because sometimes I felt like it was rigged so that you could only lose. And I think, in fact, there are some moments where it is rigged against you. It's a kind of trick-based card game, and you can actually play it with a normal deck of cards. Reminded me a lot of euchre. If folks have ever played euchre, that's like a huge thing in the Midwest. Everybody plays euchre. Cool. But like the scoring system is different than euchre, but a lot of the rest of it is very similar to euchre. But basically it's a card game you play with a partner against two other people who are also on a team. And it does give you that break. And sometimes I felt like that break was really helpful to get me to keep wanting to go, because depending on the mood you're in, or if you've had a long day, sometimes playing a visual novel feels like a bit more work. I mean, I don't know, games are interactive.
It's like, all right, and let's go.
And all the reading, and like, it really just depends on what you're doing. And so Spoils does feel like a good, helpful break from that, and it would kind of get me back into it. If I was getting like sleepy, like, oh, I'm reading and now I'm in a nap mood, I need to play something that's more active. Doing a game of Spoils would get me back in the mood, and I would be able to keep going. What did you think of Spoils?
Similarly, I mean, for me at first, I was deeply intimidated because I feel like I'm not very good at card games. And it also takes, like, I'm the person who sits with a new game's instruction manual for like an hour and reads it cover to cover and then tries to explain it to someone else for me to learn. Yeah. So when they were like, all right, time to learn this card game, I was like, oh no. But I appreciated the way that they onboarded the player to the game. It was very like progressive in terms of it took a couple games for them to introduce all of the rules fully. And so by the time I got to my third round of the game, I really felt like I was grasping it and able to start having fun with it. So like from a mechanical standpoint, I thought that the developers did an excellent job of introducing and explaining the game without it feeling tedious. I now look forward to opportunities to play it. Like, I almost feel like I want to play it IRL. And honestly,
I feel like you easily could.
Yeah, let's just play it. Honestly, any game that has a game within the game, I'm like, this is like some big brain shit. Yeah. Like, it's one of my fantasies of, at some point in my life, I would love to invent a simple, like a card game or a board game. And so I have so much respect for people who are like, not only are we going to create this complex relationship-driven, dynamic narrative story, we're also going to create a card game with its own mechanics and culture around it in the game. I'm like, that shit is just amazing to me. But similarly, I think my one complaint is just the fact that I was going to mention to you that like, I'll like, because you play on a team with someone, and so often it's like the hand is going great, and logically the AI, and then the partner just like completely fucks you, and I'm like, why would any person play that card unless you're trying to sabotage us right now? So after a certain point, it felt like I was almost battling my own teammate to try to win, and it made me sort of doubt, like, is this like a weird AI thing, or is it literally set up for me to fail, which kind of took some of the wind out of my sails, so to speak. But overall, I appreciate that context you added around why it was included, because I absolutely believe and agree that it adds a nice way of breaking up the narrative a bit and giving something different to do. I'm into it.
I similarly would get annoyed at my partner sometimes, and it's when you're playing a partner, again, like I have experience playing euchre in real life, it can sometimes feel like your partner is fucking you but the way those games are set up, you're put in scenarios where you may have to play you may be forced to play a card that is not the best card to play, that you don't want to play, because you're tied to having to play a specific suit each hand. And if the only card you have of that suit fucks you over, you still have to play it. When you're playing with an AI companion, you're not seeing their face as they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, you know, they just play it, they just throw it out there, and they're like, doo-doo-doo. It's like,
I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you.
But there's a moment where the game actually comments on, I can't remember, one of the characters that you play says something about like, I'm not going to remember the exact line, but like there's actually a line of dialogue where a character says something to the effect of like, you can't win them all, or like sometimes you're just destined to lose, or sometimes there's no winning. And it made me wonder if they do have, especially some of the early ones, because I noticed like I lost like 4 or 5 times in a row before I ever won a game of spoils. And I was like, is this all just luck? Am I just not quite getting it? Or or like, are some of these actually set up that you lose because you're learning the game and they want you to lose at it? So I think some of those losses are like intentionally designed, which is interesting for them to like kind of put their thumb on the scale a little bit.
Yeah. I also just appreciate the way that the card game reflects kind of the culture of the world that you're in the sense that this is a post like capitalistic implosion, like post-apocalyptic society where, you know, money was the root of all evil. And even in this card game, it's like set up in a way where if you are winning by too much of a margin, you can actually end up having too many points, and then all of those points go to the opponent and you actually get 0 points for the round.
Yeah.
There's this concept of hoarding, of like, do you really need that much to be successful, or is it edging out of sportsmanlike conduct to be winning by that much of a margin?
Yep.
And this concept of getting greedy, even in a competitive context, is like fascinating to me. And I know we could talk more about the world of the game, but I just appreciated the way the card game also reflects what the people of the game believe. So that was cool.
Well, and even the way the card game is set up where it's trick based, as I said, which means, you know, you go around the table, each person lays a card, and then one team wins the trick, which means they win the points of the hand, or the other team wins the trick. Now, in most trick based card games, or at least, again, euchre is my point of context, the team that wins gets all those cards. Now, the scoring system is quite different, but the only people who get points when a trick is resolved are the team that won the trick. In spoils, when the trick is finished, the team that loses gets the card that won the trick. And now the way scoring works in spoils is that each card has a point value, and that's what contributes to the points that you get at the end of the trick. So 4 cards are laid out. One of those cards, the card that won the trick, which is usually the highest value card, is going to go to the losers of the trick, and the other 3 cards are going to go to the winners of the trick. A lot of the higher level cards are worth fewer points, but like a jack, like a king and queen are worth 0 points, and that's usually how you'll win a trick, but a jack is worth 11. If you win a trick with a jack, your opponent gets 11 points. Even all of the other 3 cards combined may not equal 11, so sometimes winning a trick actually hurts you as well. And the fact that you actually divvy up the winnings in that way, I mean, it adds another layer of strategy, but I also think it continues to speak to you the world of the game and how nothing is ever like, hoarding is discouraged and no winning is ever entirely yours. It's always shared. So yeah, I think it's cool how much the card game reflects the values and culture of the world that they built around it. I want to talk more about that world in a second, but a couple more things I want to highlight around the gameplay. As you're going through, there's kind of a collection sticker book. So as you interact with various things, you're earning stickers for your almanac. That really seems like it's mostly just a sort of tracking thing to get rewarded for kind of seeing and interacting with everything that exists in the game. But it's still cool to flip through the stickers, and it's aesthetically looks cool. You're not like placing the stickers or anything like that, like other games we've played, like Season, where you're like building a journal. Right. It's all kind of preset, but still earning them I thought was fun, and trying to find all of the different things.
It felt good to open my scrapbook periodically and watch all the stickers fill up.
Yeah.
Oh God, that felt good.
Yeah. It's got an incredibly smart save system that really supports replayability. So as I said, some of the most crucial decisions that you'll kind of make in the game are which island to go to next. Because in the world of Saltsea, the whole world is flooded and you're kind of traveling between different islands on your boat. Waterworld, anyone? This is a much less violent.
Just like Waterworld, yeah.
This is a much less. Have you ever seen that movie?
We're aging ourselves, but yeah.
Okay. I was obsessed with that movie as a kid, but that movie is fucked up. I should not have been watching that as a child.
No.
Anyway, So yeah, getting to choose which island you're going to next, and then getting to choose which crew members to bring with you on the island are the kind of the biggest key decisions in the game, really smartly, because those are some of the most impactful decisions that you can make. The decision of which island to go to next is at the end of the chapter before the team goes to that island. I have seen so many games that want you to replay them, do something like that, and then the only way to load a save and replay part of the game is to jump in at the top of a chapter, which means that you would have to replay an entire chapter to get to that endpoint decision to influence where the next chapter goes, and it would completely ruin the chances of me actually going through and seeing how scenarios play out differently. They've incredibly smartly placed checkpoints right before the crew makes the decision of which island to go to, and right after the crew, or right before the crew makes the decision of who to send on the into the island. So you can actually very specifically target those key decision points to go back and replay from that key decision. And I, as someone who likes to get platinum trophies, I applaud them for this because I still think it's going to be a slog isn't maybe the right word, but it would take a while to get the platinum. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but the fact that they put that kind of save system in there makes it way more likely that I will, or even just that I'll go back and question some key decisions that I made to see how things play out differently, which I've already done with kind of one of the big turning points in the game.
Cool.
The final thing I want to talk about, which I think we're going to dive into more deeply, and I'm sure you'll have some stuff to say, and I can stop taking up all of the oxygen in the room, is what I think is one of the most interesting systems in the game, which is the ability to track and resolve issues.
Yes.
The way the game logs what in most games would be side quests, here they're called issues, and they're not really quests at all. They first introduce you to these through something that is way more of a traditional side quest, which is in the very first chapter of the game. You are playing as the two crewmates who are going out to, the captain has just disappeared, and you're doing an investigation on the initial island that you're all living on to try to figure out if anyone on the island saw anything or has any idea where your captain went. One of the crew members, Molpe, who is actually the captain's romantic partner, has a young baby. I mean, he's like less than 6 months old, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, he's like 6 months old. Yeah.
Yeah. And he needs a new sling for her to be able to better hold him. And so you get one of these issues, one of these side quests, to find a replacement sling for Molpe while you're out investigating the island. And so you can complete that. And that feels like a pretty traditional side quest, right? It's like she needs a sling, find a sling, done. But from there, they go into things that are way more relationship based between the characters, and are like, it's not as simple as finding a thing and it's resolving like that issues. Yeah, it's very intangible. I mean, one example is through a series of decisions that I made while traveling with Molpe and Merle, who's Merle is kind of like a scientist and documentarian that travels with the crew, and he's really interested in anthropology and like learning about cultures and documenting it. And he's also has a lot of interest in the history that came before them. And so he's like a very scientific, intelligent guy, like wants to write things down and document them. But of course that can make him a bit bookish or make him feel a bit disconnected from other humans because he views everything through this lens of, I want to understand it, study it, and document it, which can be off-putting, right? He's traveling with Molpe. Molpe does this journey to find their captain is incredibly personal for her. The captain was her romantic partner. The captain has gone missing. They pretty early in the game start to have questions about whether the captain was in fact kidnapped or if she left. And it's not certain. And so she's a young mother, and a mother to a very young child, and her romantic partner has disappeared. Like, this is all very stressful for her. Yeah. And she's kind of put in a leadership role as someone who was already like a very like strong and capable person on their boat, and the captain's partner, like she's kind of automatically looked to as a leader. So one of the issues that came up for me in my playthrough was that Molpe became convinced that Merle didn't take the search for Captain Maja very seriously, that he had other priorities. And I was never able to resolve that. in my playthrough, despite trying to get them to interact with each other and do things that remained an unresolved. You can also have things where they get logged as what it says called scuppered, which means that you both didn't resolve it and the situation's just logged as untenable. There was nothing to do about it. There was one situation where a crew member kind of insulted and caused another crew member to doubt themselves, and I was never able to resolve that. Things happened, and the crew members just never came back around to it, and it was scuppered. It was just a thing that was always going to linger between them. That shit was super interesting. How did you find that whole issue system? You're nodding emphatically.
No, I just that's like one of the things that to me stood out around how this developer went about like, you know, reimagining, renegotiating like what it means to engage with a primarily narrative storyline or narrative driven game is like the relationships themselves becoming fodder for change and choices impacting like the missions almost being like more about like maybe the real adventure was the friendships we made along the way kind of
but
vibe.
Truly in this insults
but actually and even the way it's visualized like an issue I love all the nautical imagery and language throughout the story, but it would show like the fraying ends of a rope trying to come together to indicate an issue. And then if it's scuppered, it's like this big, nasty, tangled mess. Yeah. And if it's resolved, then it's like the ropes are able to come together into a strong knot. And, you know, the implications that has for what it means to be in conflict and relationship and coming out of conflict and how it can make certain relationships stronger. Like just that kind of little touch was very cool. And similarly, I think at first, just thinking about approaching something from like one character feels that another character doesn't take them seriously. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to resolve that?
Right.
Like, it just creates more drive to like I'm not just embarking on this island to meet a straightforward mission goal. I'm also hoping that along the way, maybe I can get deeper and figure out how to help resolve this relationship between two characters. Like that was just a very compelling reason to keep playing. And I think too, it was just also added dimension to the fact that, I mean, from the very first moments of the game like speaks directly to you and is like, this is a game where you're not making decisions as an individual, like you are collectively influencing this crew. And that even comes down to like, when you're engaging in dialogue, the two options that you're offered for how you might answer, like sometimes you're deciding which crew member is going to talk next instead of what specifically they're going to say. Or maybe you're picking an emotion or an indication of what they might say, but you don't know which crew member is going to actually step forward and execute that thing. And so this idea of just collectivism, not just from how you're controlling the characters in the game, but also within the game of cultural understanding of what we owe to each other and what fair trade looks like and what competition looks like and what resolving conflict looks like. Like, it's just such an excellent, crash course into socialism and and kind of a different way of viewing the world without beating you over the head with like, this is like, I don't know, a progressive game or whatever. Like it's like, I don't know. It's all very cool. It's very was into it.
It's very cool. I want to say just two things about kind of the world and lore that they set up. And then I want to go deeper on this thing you're bringing up around how the game is incredibly socialist, incredibly all about collective action and community building. But I think it's important to understand the world that the game's set in, which we've alluded to a little bit. You've got this is post-apocalyptic. The world that we know today has been completely flooded over, but there are remnants of it all around. And so the different islands that you visit, sometimes you can actually see things like there might be an old telescope hub because that was high on a hill. And so now all that's left is this island, which is just the top of the hill. And there's a telescope there. There's an area of the map that is full of skyscrapers, but just the tops of them, right? But it's considered like a wreckage area. Ships get in there and they wreck against the skyscraper remnants and break up. And there's this whole story of the hoarders, of that being what brought down the previous society, was that people hoarded and took more than they needed and didn't leave enough for everyone else, and built towers to the sky. And according to the lore, because at the very beginning of the game, you can choose to hear a story about the past or the future. And I chose the past. And so they kind of talked about it through this lens of like, the seas were jealous, or the seas grew angry at the hoarding and the desire to like build to the skies. And so they rose and flooded and washed all these people away. A little biblical in the way it's presented. But the game, while that being is like the past of it, it's way more focused on what happened. Like if we could get that kind of fresh start, if humanity could get this sort of lesson against the ills of capitalism. And, you know, the hoarders, I think, is a pretty clear metaphor for where capitalism has brought us, and like this idea that the few have more than the many. What if we had an opportunity to reset, to rebuild from that? And I think perhaps a lesser game, or maybe a worse written game, might make that almost utopian. And to some degree, this is like the world of Saltsea is a little utopian in the way people are pursuing these values, but it's not naive.
Yes.
Which I think was really important. And I appreciate it. I have it's a little bit of a long quote here from Emily Price in her review for Paste magazine, titled "Saltsea Chronicles beautifully finds a way forward." Emily gave the game a 9.7, I believe. Like really liked Saltsea. And I have this quote here that I'd like to read from Emily, because I think it really captures this sentiment of the game presenting a utopian idea, but not in a naive way. So Emily writes, in its portrayal of a society based on mutual entanglement, Saltsea Chronicles resists the temptation to sever this beautifully drawn post-disaster world from reality and make it pure fantasy. Throughout, it echoed the philosophies of anarchist and socialist thinkers, as well as existing and pre-existing collectivist societies. In linking the Saltsea archipelago, is it archipelago?
That sounds right to me.
We're going to say archipelago. Flame me in the comments. To our world. So in linking the Saltsea archipelago to our world, while also making it meaningfully distinct, the game resists becoming an allegory and becomes a story in and of itself. It extends beyond being a mirror for contemporary society and instead becomes an illustration of an alternate path forward, another way we could approach the same issues of climate change and environmental devastation that make up the characters' pasts and presents. In the same vein, Saltsea Chronicles is interested in the injustices that arise when you attempt to construct a wholly non-hierarchical society. It chooses not to structure post-flood Saltsea as a perfect utopia, instead noting repeatedly and often the ways it fails. In my time with the game, this was what impressed me the most. Its commitment to realistically presenting the challenges that would be present in a society that's nominally about fairness and mutual input. People get greedy and claim power anyway. People leverage non-hierarchy to be in control. And less maliciously, people are forced into a controlling role despite their wishes because of other people's expectations and desires. But treating something seriously is the first step towards saying it's possible. Treating the idea of a non-hierarchical organization seriously here means investigating the ways it could be misused, and this means engaging with it more deeply. It also allows characters space to be wrong and to admit later that their minds have changed. This is part of what makes the characters feel so great. They aren't collections of traits, but individuals who are affected by the beliefs of others and learn from them. So, yeah, I mean, what really resonates with me there is the bit about realistically presenting the challenges that would be present in society that's nominally about fairness and input. It's committed to that. Like, these people are not perfect and they still have to navigate challenges. I feel like so much, you know, as someone whose politics do lean more towards socialism and communism, like one of the big, you know, the devil's advocate arguments is like, well, yeah, but like some people are just going to be inherently like greedy or bad or want to like hoard or like claim power. And like, what do you do then if there's no one in charge to manage that? And I think this game really tries to engage with that in a realistic way about what that might look like. And sometimes even going so far as to give you moments where people who are skeptics about, like there's a couple different times where the game is showcasing like restorative justice and how a society is engaging with that. But it also gives you an opportunity to talk to people who are skeptics about that and how they might feel about that, or how someone who is a victim of someone's crimes might feel about a community providing that person restorative justice and giving them an opportunity to redeem themselves. Like, and it holds all of that in the messy way that it needs to be held, without saying that we got to throw the baby out with the bathwater and like just get rid of this whole system because it's not worth doing. It says, no, it will be hard and it might be messy, but here's a way forward, and ultimately believes that this way forward is better than what we're fucking doing now. I don't know. I found that message really powerful.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I don't know if there's too much more for me to add to that. I think you put it really well, but I think, just not shying away from saying like, this solution is perfect and the answer to all of our problems. There will be new problems that come up, and it's just a matter of how we go about, moving forward. Like any choice we make is going to have give or take. I mean, there are still people who are unhappy, still people who are still finding their place, people who are finding themselves maybe ostracized or judged because of where the values of society are now. Like it just sort of, there's still room for hurt and prejudice and pain. It just manifests differently because of the sort of rules and agreements that have been made culturally. And so there's still space to keep striving to be better and keep rethinking and renegotiating what culture is and what it means. And I mean, I feel like that's the best you can hope from, like, no culture is done. The work is never finished.
Yeah.
So like, I think the way that this game joyfully acknowledges that and is like, and that's why we're alive, because we're just constantly working and growing and changing. Like, it was the way it envisioned a different way of living and everything that means was just really cool to witness. And I think similarly, I'm just so enthralled by these characters because they feel very real, and they're not trying to assign morality to like, oh, we live in this utopian society, so we're these like characters that are like better than you. Like, I don't feel like this game is talking down to me or trying to indoctrinate me.
Yeah.
It's just standing in its truth, and it's so much like, it's very approachable in kind of what it's trying to say, because I don't feel like I'm being left behind or that I'm missing out. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It really tries to meet the audience where they are and is incredibly hopeful while still wrestling with the difficulties and the challenges of what this potential society might look like. And I think it's important to see representations of that, because it's so easy to just assume something's not possible based on all the potential critiques that we can come up with in our head, or potential challenges we can come up with in our head. But to actually like try to wrestle with it, is the first step. How did you find the experience of playing as the whole crew rather than one specific character? This game really, and it, like you referenced already, tells you right in the beginning, like, you're not playing as one person. This is not a hero's journey. Like, you are responsible for this entire crew. And so you are, at various points in the game, asked to see things from each of the different characters' perspectives and make decisions based on those perspectives, and try to determine how those perspectives should knit together and learn from each other. I don't know. How was that experience for you? Because it's dramatically different than I think pretty much most media that I've encountered and how stories presented, and especially most games, where you're really put in the position of being a hero and an all-powerful kind of entity that's here to save and change things. Like, dramatically different experience in Saltsea.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like like everything else about it, that dynamic was just one more way that this game was teaching or giving me something. Like I think right in the beginning, the game says like, there are no right or wrong choices. There's only your choices. Mm-hmm. And I think at first, when it was like, so by the way, you're going to be making collective decisions for the crew, I was kind of like, oh, what? Like, but what about me? Like, I thought game meant about me. And seeing that, like, there's no right or wrong. There's only your choices. Like, it almost was something freeing and comforting. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of like so many things do, like just like trauma work and understanding that, like, you know, so many of the things that cause us to be traumatized, you know, like obviously it's not our fault, but healing from it and choosing how you're going to move forward is your responsibility. Like I think similarly, this stepping away from ego and like taking myself out of the equation and being put into a position where I need to put myself aside and think of like what's best for the community, not just for me. I think practicing that in a safe space can be just really transformative for even like how we view the world and how we view our place in the world, like outside of this game. And so like after my initial momentary discomfort with like, well, what does that mean? Like, am I not going to be able to connect as deeply with these characters because I'm having to think about all of them instead of focusing on just one? Like how am I going to maintain and manage all of these different worldviews? Like, I feel like the opposite happened. Like, I did feel more closely connected to each individual character. And I felt too, like my own worldview was continually being pushed because I was being asked and forced to put myself in the shoes of so many different people and constantly switching context between like, you know, maybe I'm going to make certain decisions as this character because I understand their motivations, but maybe I'm going to make completely different decisions as this character because of their motivations, and understanding everyone's strengths and weaknesses. And maybe this person's personality would be better to get the answers I need in this situation versus this person's personality is going to provide the strength I need to get through a completely different situation. And it's just like, if anything, like similarly to how in the polyamorous community, they say love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Like there is no end to, love is not a finite resource. It just keeps growing. I'm not saying that everyone has to be polyamorous, but I do think that sentiment is really important for how we think about like just friendships and platonic relationships as well. Like you don't say to yourself like, oh, I'm at capacity. Like I already have a romantic partner, so I can't have love for a friend. It's like, there's no limit there. And I think that this game too kind of reflects that sentiment of like, there's no scarcity when like, just because this game isn't revolving around me doesn't mean that it's taking anything away from me. And so I ended up really enjoying this collective decision making and collective gameplay, and found it to be very like healing.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what you just said there. And I similarly had that moment of resistance when the game at first was like, yeah, so you're not playing as a specific character, like you're playing as all of them. And I felt, I mean, so much of playing video games is about that role-playing aspect, whether it's specifically a role-playing game like RPG or it's whether it is or it isn't, there's still an element of role playing that is one of the main reasons I play games. I think one of the things we've talked about in this podcast a lot is like getting to insert yourself into another character and make decisions from their lens and like hold that perspective and all the benefits that can provide to give you opportunities to explore different sides of yourself or see things from a different lens. And so it is funny to me that like both of us had that initial at being told that, oh, you're not going to role play as one character, you're going to role play as a bunch, that our immediate response was like, oh, well, how could I possibly connect?
Yeah.
When it's actually like just taking the idea of role playing and like, yeah, opening it up, like giving you more. Like I am role playing as all of these characters. I see the world through all of their lenses. And then I'm trying to figure out how they can learn from each other and make each other better and resolve conflicts. If this character is upset and feeling down, who's the right person to pair them with? That's in some ways it felt like it triggered my manager brain, like the way I try to connect my staff to projects that I think they're going to be good at or going to engage them. So yeah, it really just made it more and enhanced it. But it is funny how conditioned we are in the video game space, in the narrative space, to be offered a one perspective, this one-to-one, like I have one perspective and therefore I can only see things from one perspective. And for this to just totally open that up and turn it on its head was so refreshing. And I don't think there's a lot of games that try to tell a story like that. I think this is relatively unique. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's the only, but I was impressed with that concept.
Yeah, I feel like maybe Baldur's Gate 3, you could argue it sort of edges onto that. But I feel like by the fact that you are still playing as one character, like you can control everyone in your party and you do get to know each of them, but you are still grounded for the most part in your main characterness. But I really do agree that this game takes it a step further. Like there is no representation of you in the game. Even in the way it, like the perspective is always multiple characters on screen, multiple interactions playing out at once. And so like that physical absence of the representation of the individual player also contributes to this tone. And yeah, I can't think of many examples that come quite to this level that they're doing here.
Yeah. How are you finding the game's it's episodic to the point where when you start a new chapter, it actually like shows the opening like intro animation again, which you can skip.
It's like Alan Wake.
It is funny that we're playing these two very episodic games in tandem with each other, dramatically different worldviews. I don't know. How have you found that episodic nature and the way the game is almost? I guess. Mutazione, the developers always said, was a bit of like meant to be a soap opera. And they're clearly, specifically, or especially Hannah Nicklin, the CEO, who is also like the lead writer and stuff. She has said that like she's very influenced by television writing, and writing is clearly super important to this. I don't know. I feel like it was obviously a very deliberate choice to break things up into episodes and make them feel like a bit of a TV show. How has that experience been for you in these first 6 chapters?
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly to like the card game being a part of it, there's something kind of like a refreshing reset with each episodic arc and then moving into the next one. I think too, with how many dynamics are playing out at once. Just now when you're saying that, it made me think about how it is kind of like, it can be a bit exhausting just in the sense that, like in the same way that, again, being in a non-monogamous dynamic where you may have multiple connections, multiple partnerships that you're fostering, it can't, like, people find that they have to get really good at managing time, managing energy, because it is a lot more work maintaining presence and emotional dynamics with more than just one other person. There's more effort having to constantly be put into communication and stuff like that. And so there's almost something, just a little bit of a break that the episodic thing provides that I haven't really internalized fully until now. Like it just sort of gives literal space to breathe and sort of recenter, maybe even come back to myself a little bit before getting ready to jump into another multi-dynamic situation. So I kind of like it. It also just provides a nice like bow on things, I think, too, with how much is going on with the various issues and resolutions and maybe failure to resolve. There's something about that reset that kind of makes you feel like when you've had a long, exhausting day and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and you're like, okay, like I'm ready. I've regrouped. Like, let's get back into it. Like there's something about that physical action that just provides nice breathing room between sections of the game. So I guess I don't know if I necessarily feel like it's funny. I'm just mentioning Alan Wake, which is probably truly the most selfish and individualistic game possible with this one. There's other aspects of that game where it feels very cinematic, from the camera work to the music and everything like that. And I guess I don't know that this came, other than the literal fact that it's separated into these episodic chapters, I don't really feel like there's much else about the game that warrants that. But that being said, I have no problem with the way that it's executed. And like you mentioned earlier, it does offer nice opportunities for replayability and pinpointing specific moments where you might want to take a different path, or try a different, diverge in a different way. And I like the flexibility and that it offers there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's still the fact that they replay the intro animation so that it almost feels like the opening credits of like a TV show or something still feels a little odd to me. I don't know. I think to your point, the show, in terms of the way the plot develops, I don't think the show feels like traditional TV.
Yeah.
But I agree that I like the pause, the breath, the kind of like formulaic layout of knowing that I'm gonna work my way through this particular island, and there's always something happening with the locals on the island too. Like this is not just about the crew going to the island and getting what they want and moving on. In fact, a huge theme of the game is this idea of like visiting and engaging with cultures that are different than yours, and respecting like land and cultural elements that you are not a part of, and navigating how to come into a community like that with your own agenda while still trying to be respectful of the people who are there and living and existing. And I think the game handles all of that, and like it just makes space for those conversations. There's specifically an island that I think it's like built on a volcano. I think it's very much meant to be a allegory or stand-in for Hawaii, and the way people, tourists will visit Hawaii and just, have no respect for the people who are living there, the indigenous folks whose land it is. And there's different people on that particular island that you can talk to, some of whom are locals and natives who have been there for a long time, and the resentment that they hold to who they call the incomers, which are the visitors and the partiers. And there's like a spa that's set up on the island, and how people have infiltrated there and come and visit all the time, and how annoyed some of the locals are. And then there's scientists who are there studying the volcano too, and they're not super welcome. And the way all those communities are at kind of not at each other's throats, but like chafing on each other as they don't, they're all there for valid reasons, but like who actually has a right to this space, and how do you hold and respect that? So when you go to a specific island, you're navigating all of that, and whatever the situation is on that island, you're, even though you're not, where some games you might come and be asked to resolve it, right? You might come to a space where there's a challenge or a problem, and you're expected to come in as the hero and fix everything. That's not the vibe here at all. And in fact, most situations, there's really nothing you can do, but you are witnessing it. You are having conversations with the people who are experiencing it, and you're learning about it. You're understanding the situation that you're walking into. And you can sometimes make decisions to make comments that are more disruptive, or maybe they're going to be insulting to the people that you're talking with. Or if you kind of want to just not engage and, respect the boundary and the fact that it's not your place to insert yourself. So there's a lot of drama that happens on the island that's not specific to the crew. So giving you that pause in between to take a breath with just the crew, let the crew unpack their feelings about what just happened, let the crew revisit some of their own internal drama before you move on to the next place, and then moving on to the next place and kind of resetting and doing that again. I really appreciated that cadence. And I think similar to Spoils, it gives you that break so that you're not constantly like in it with the drama, or in it with the reading of the text and the making the decisions. It's a good cycle, and it really lends itself to, each chapter is roughly an hour to an hour and a half. Like, I really appreciated being able to play it like one chapter at a time each night. And it feels like a storybook in terms of the presentation sometimes. So it was a really good experience for playing the game. And so I think it's a cool way to lay it out, even if I think the like here's the intro credits kind of a vibe was a little odd. I don't know if they needed to fully lean into that TV element, but I appreciated the chapter breaks. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're coming near the end of our conversation here. Were there any other themes or character moments or anything else that you wanted to elevate from the game that stood out to you or that you wanted to talk about?
So there was one quote that I think sort of adds to kind of the collectivism and the non-hierarchical nature of this game and sort of being forced to come to understanding, or if not understanding, then agreement of how to move forward. And a lot of that is there's this tension between kind of science and reason, and then this deep spirituality and mysticism in the game. And it even goes so far as there's this practice called dream sailing, where people have basically what feels like lucid dreams or visions, where they're actually able to connect with others and understand things about the world that they just couldn't articulate and reason through in the awake day to day, but in this altered state are able to come across truths. Anyone who's done mushrooms probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. But there are characters who are very serious about this dream sailing practice, going so far as to create spaces specifically for dream sailing. Maybe there are teas or incenses they burn, herbs they burn to kind of facilitate the passage from the physical plane into this altered state. And so there are people that do this and take it very seriously and make meaning from it. And there are others who think it's totally farcical, has no basis in reality, and reject these things that can't be explained logically. And so there's this conversation between two characters where one is talking about kind of how fascinating it is that people are able to dream sail and kind of what that means. And there's another character who completely rejects it to the point of sort of as soon as someone brings up dream sailing, this character is like, oh my God, like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. Like, it's nonsense. It's a joke. And this character interrupts that kind of rejection and says, part of growing up is learning that other people are as real as we are. We cannot understand them, but we can offer them understanding. And it's a very simple line, just learning that other people are as real as we are. But I think that's such a huge life lesson distilled into this one sentence, but I think is something that even in my own growth from thinking back to when I was 20 and my worldview to what I know now as a 30-year-old, it's like, yeah, literally internalizing that other people are just as real as I am. And that like there are convictions I hold so deeply that I know that no one can ever change my mind on. Of course, someone else is going to have similar beliefs and understandings about the world, and it would be foolish of me to try to change their mind. Now, of course, there are like fundamental things that I'm not saying that like, oh, it's okay, like kumbaya,
to be
like
a bigot or hateful or harmful. Or,
exactly. But I think when being in community with others and about things that are less, like, I think you could go back and forth all day about the balance between science and spirituality and logic and mysticism. There are absolutely things in our lives that can't be explained. And I think this concept of, divorcing from the main character syndrome and understanding that like other people's very real feelings, like that our perspective defines our reality, and the space that there really is to hold many contradicting things at once, because there are things that we just can't explain. I don't know. I just thought the game did a really good job of sort of, again, kind of introducing, kind of making you think about that kind of stuff as well. And I think too, there's the facet of like these two characters. The character sharing that was much older than the character who was rejecting this idea of spirituality. And so like, I think it can be very difficult. I remember and I'm not saying that I'm like old by any means, but like, I remember just how difficult it was for me to accept anything from anyone like older than me as like a 19 to 20-year-old at that there's nothing they can teach me. And I know that like,
you know it all.
There's only getting older is the only way to cure that specific thing. Like I'm not trying to sit here and saying like, so all you youngins out there listening, like listen to an adult next time. Like I know that that's like totally fruitless. So I'm not even trying to like get that across. But it was just, I don't know. Again, it's just, there's so much that this game has to offer. And I think meditating on that kind of thing as well, of like almost too, like the more experience you get, the less you realize you know, was just one more aspect of the game that I found very enjoyable and sort of mind opening to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have time to go into it, but there is, for folks who are interested, there's another blog piece that was written by Hannah Nicklin, the CEO of Die Gute Fabrik, that is posted on gamedeveloper.com called Deep Dive, Designing a Narrative for Multiple Middles and Multiple Heroes in Saltsea Chronicles, where Hannah like talks about specifically some of the influences that created this idea, but goes on to define it's not her concept, and she references where the person she pulled it from and stuff in the blog post, but this idea of sociological storytelling versus psychological storytelling, and how so much of media is grounded in psychological storytelling, which really grounds it in that one perspective, and decisions are made from a very like personal place, versus sociological storytelling, and how they apply that to their game is that as the player, you're actually not invited to inhabit, alter, and reveal the inner landscape of a single character and a world solely shaped by that character's morals, journey, and experiences. And instead, people who are experiencing the narrative are invited to shape the conditions through which the community of the crew navigates. In judging their journey down different paths, the player will discover how the individuals in the community change, how they relate to one another and to the world around them. And characters are shaped by the different iterations of their society, and they shape it in turn with their actions. And so sociological storytelling is much more on showing the landscape and the conditions that influence the way a person behaves and perceives things, whereas psychological is much more internal and presents the individual as the person who is shaping the like morals and experience of the story and the world in a narrative. And kind of like, I don't know. It's a really different way to tell stories. It's, even though it is used by other folks, but the fact that that breakdown of that, I just found it all super interesting. Yeah. As someone who like really thoroughly enjoyed like media lit classes and stuff in college. I think if that's of interest to you, I think it's really cool that Hannah and the team puts that kind of stuff out there and talks about it, and that they think about games in that way and they think about storytelling in that way. So definitely recommend people go check it out. So are you going to finish Saltsea Chronicles?
Oh, yeah. And I gotta go. Let's wrap this
up. Amazing. One final thing that I wanted to shout out before we finish our conversation here that I just think is cool. A lot of times when we have to take a break to talk about a developer, it's because there's something not great that they are doing, or workplace conditions, or there's a lot of negative or more tough stuff to talk about that comes up in these conversations. But I actually have something really positive to say about Die Gute Fabrik, on top of all of the positive things we've already said, which is that immediately following the release of Saltsea Chronicles, they published a report sharing the carbon impact that they created during development of the game, running from January 2020 to the launch. There's a great read on gamesindustry.biz written up by Sophie McAvoy, called Die Gute Fabrik and the Necessity to Tackle Climate in Action. And in that piece, Hannah Nicklin, again, the CEO, is specifically quoted as saying, "I wanted to show studios of our scale," which I think, I don't know exactly how many employees they have. It's like 20 or so, fully remote. They do a 4-day work week, which is just fucking awesome. But Hannah wanted to show studios of our scale that this kind of data is likely data they already have. She says there's a bunch of work that's already been done on tracking climate emissions for different activities when it comes to a company setting. So in a way, The fact that we keep records of what we spend, who works with us, when, for how long, and we know what country they're based in was already the raw data needed to track our emissions. So all it takes from there is the calculations. We'd been keeping the records already. So I think it's really cool that they did this, that they published this, that they're trying to make it they think that that's information that players should have when they're buying a game, is what the carbon impact of the game was, and that they're trying to make it more accessible for especially smaller studios to be able to track and share that information. So I thought that was a really cool move. I just want to shout them out for that before we wrap up this conversation.
Yeah.
Go play Saltsea Chronicles, folks. Really special game. All right. Time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you for tuning in. And we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can snag that monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month. Or now, it's really cool, Patreon has the ability for you to actually sign up for free, and then you'll just get all of our public updates, which are specifically related to the podcast and our public streams. So if you're not interested in giving us the $2, you can still subscribe on Patreon and just get the public updates. And speaking of public streams, though, we will be live this coming week on both Tuesday and Thursday, October 31st and November 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's right. We're streaming Alan Wake on Halloween. I got tripped up on my own copy. Wasted by my own petard. But we are we are streaming on Halloween, and it's gonna be scary. Or probably not. Right. Probably not scary, but we'll be here.
I'll just be screaming. Yeah,
come spend your Halloween with us instead of going to a party or seeing people in your life, please. So be sure to subscribe to Pixel Therapy Pod over on YouTube. Turn on the notifications so you know when we're going live, and don't miss out. Of course, listeners can also support the show by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, and come follow us over on that hellscape known as X, aka Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter. We're at Pixel Therapy Pod.
Help.
And your support on those platforms is very important to us, and we appreciate it just as much as your subscriptions elsewhere.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. This was the side quest for our Patreon episode this month, and it's worth repeating here as well. That source is the GazaChildren'sFund.org. The Gaza Strip has been under siege for over a decade, with a dangerous decline in the standard of living, unrelenting poverty, and inadequate healthcare. Gaza is a continuing disaster zone and a site of genocide currently. So the Gaza Children's Fund is a not-for-profit organization founded in 2010 by a group of volunteers and social activists to help address the issues concerning disadvantaged Palestinians. Check out GazaChildren'sFund.org.
Thank you for that incredibly important side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more Pixel Therapy. Bye-bye.